note to the reader. What follows is a long, detailed narrative tracing the lineage of a single child named Shaun. This story weaves through biology, astronomy, geology, and human history, traveling across eons to show how the simplest cosmic events eventually led to one particular birth in the 21st century. It is part science, part history, part awe-inspiring tale of just how deep our connectedness runs. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Present Day, Meeting Shaun. Shaun's tiny fingers, curled around his mother's thumb, told a silent story of inheritance. At a mere few weeks old, his eyes, blue for the moment, though they might shift in color as he grows, blinked in wonder at the world around him. He is born in a hospital in a bustling city, inheriting a swirl of genetic traits, the shape of his father's nose, the curve of his mother's ears, and perhaps the dimples from a distant great-great-grandparent. Shaun is an individual, brand new to the planet, yet he is also the latest manifestation of an ancient lineage that stretches back through time so far that the mind boggles. When we say Shaun has a mother and father, that sounds simple enough. But if we move one step backward, going to his grandparents, suddenly we find 4 people, each of whom contributed 1/4 of Shaun's genetic legacy. Back another step, 8 great-grandparents, another, 16. This doubling can continue seemingly without end, limited only by the boundaries of the entire human genealogical tree. Yet once you go deep enough, you inevitably run into a tapestry that all of humanity shares, and eventually, all of life shares. But it doesn't stop with the living domain on Earth. The code in Shaun's DNA is written in atoms that were forged in stars that long ago exploded, scattering the seeds of heavier elements into space. The entire cosmos, from the first moment of the Big Bang, set the stage for Shaun's arrival. He is the result of an unbroken chain of survival, starting from the earliest microbes on Earth, through fish and amphibians, reptiles and mammals, all the way to bipedal hominins, and finally to modern humans. This is the story of every human who has ever lived, but let's place our focus entirely on Shaun, a singular example that will let us marvel at the improbable chain of events needed for any one person's birth. Our journey will begin here, at the hospital, in modern times, in modern society, then stretch back in time, step by step, pivoting to key events and transformations that made his existence possible. Shaun rests quietly, unaware of the magnitude of his ancestral inheritance. His mother softly hums a lullaby while his father drapes a blanket over him. As you watch, you might muse about what it took for this moment to arrive. How many lineages converged from all corners of the Earth, and indeed from star matter created billions of years ago? To understand that, and to bring this epic story to life, we must begin the journey backward, peeling away the layers of time. Chapter 2. Doubling Ancestors, a Tangle of Family Trees. As we take one step back in time from Shaun, we reach his parents. 2 individuals, each with their own life stories, families, and genealogies. Step back another generation, 4 grandparents, living or deceased, each shaped by personal histories, wars, migrations, joys, tragedies, across decades. Then to 8 great-grandparents and so on. The pattern continues, and we might imagine an enormous genealogical chart splaying outward, doubling and overlaps. We can note that this doubling each generation is a simplified illustration, because in reality, genealogical lines often fold back on themselves, especially if families have historically lived in relatively contained communities. Over centuries and millennia, populations intermarry, and the total genealogical count doesn't purely double forever. Humanity is not made of billions of completely separate lines, but a braided river of interconnections. Still, the doubling rule for a few dozen generations helps us visualize an ever-expanding family tree. If we take that doubling too far, let's say around 40 generations, which might span roughly 1,000 years, we get a theoretical ancestor count in the trillions, which obviously exceeds the population of the Earth at any given time. Clearly there's a vast overlap, yet it remains astonishing that we could fill entire libraries with the stories of the men and women who contributed, in some small fraction, to the genetic background that would one day produce Shaun. One thread among many. The concept of a family tree can be misleading if we only look at small slices of time. Zoom out far enough and you find a sprawling network that we all share. After all, every single person living today is connected to a single genealogical tree if we go back some tens of thousands of years. That means that on a deeper level, Shaun's family tree merges with everyone else's. But for the purpose of this narrative, let us remain close to the idea that each step back in time leads us to double the number of ancestors, at least until we reach the deep evolutionary past, when we move beyond named ancestors to unknown individuals who left their mark in our DNA as partial contributors. We can also note how culture, language, technology, and even geography shape the genealogical path. Perhaps one of Shaun's great-grandfathers fought in a world war, traveling across seas, where he met someone who would become Shaun's great-grandmother. Perhaps on another branch, a grandmother emigrated for a job opportunity. Each twist or turn in the family's story was crucial. If one moment had gone differently, if that family member had missed a train or never left home, there might be no Shaun. Genetic recombination. All along these generations, genes mix through the process of sexual reproduction. Half the chromosomes come from one parent, half from the other. Over millennia, this recombination constantly shuffles the deck of genetic material. The result is the unique set of instructions that built Shaun's body. His heart's rhythmic beat, his liver's filter, his neurons' firing patterns. Everything is orchestrated by those instructions. But of course, even those genes themselves are molecules built from elements that have their own cosmic lineage. To understand it deeply, we must go much further back, beyond the named ancestors in human history, into the realm of early Homo sapiens, then further to the common ancestors we share with other primates, and eventually to the first animals, the first multicellular organisms, the first single-celled creatures, and ultimately the earliest replicators on Earth. Then onward still, back to the formation of our planet, our sun, our galaxy, and the entire universe. The events in question formed the ultimate foundation for Shaun's being. So let's keep pushing backward, generation by generation, until we reach the point where the concept of generation itself becomes something else, something more profound in the evolutionary sense. Chapter 3. Hominins, Tracing the Human Branch. Eventually, genealogical lines pass beyond the realm of memory, recorded history, or even archaeological record. We cross into prehistory, where written or oral traditions cannot guide us. Here, the story must be told by bones in the ground, by radiometric dates, by the traces of tool use or footprints left in ancient mud. At this juncture, the story belongs to paleoanthropologists and evolutionary biologists, who piece together the puzzle of how modern humans came to be. A common hominin ancestor. At some point around 6 to 7 million years ago, there lived an ape-like ancestor who gave rise to at least two major lineages. One lineage led to the chimpanzees and bonobos of today, and the other lineage led to us, Homo sapiens. This ancient being wasn't just a chimp or just a human, but a creature whose physical and genetic traits we can only hypothesize by examining fossils and living species. This ancestor was the concestor, using Richard Dawkins' term, for the human-chimpanzee split. Far deeper in time we will find concestors for primates and other mammals, but for now, let us focus on the immediate step that differentiated humans. From this split, our ancestors slowly evolved upright walking, changes in jaw and teeth structure, and bigger brains. Scientists have given names to some of these transitional species: Sahelanthropus chadensis, Orrorin tuganensis, and the better-known Ardipithecus group. Each was an experimental branch of evolution. Some left no descendants, while others eventually led to Australopithecus species and later on, the genus Homo. Among the best-known early hominins is Australopithecus afarensis, epitomized by the famous fossil Lucy. These small-brained yet bipedal primates roamed eastern Africa a few million years ago. Over time, new forms emerged, Homo habilis, nicknamed the handy man because of associations with stone tools, and then Homo erectus, who ventured far out of Africa and became a wide-ranging species across the Old World. Millennia passed, and in different parts of the world distinct groups evolved. In Europe and Western Asia, for instance, arose the Neanderthals, in Asia the Denisovans. Meanwhile, in Africa, the lineage that would become modern humans, Homo sapiens, was taking shape. waves of migration. Modern humans, with our larger brains, lighter skeletons, and capacity for complex language, emerged in Africa roughly 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. The dating is continually refined by new fossil discoveries. Sometime around 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, a subset of these humans began migrating out of Africa, eventually reaching the Middle East, Europe, Asia, Australia, and many millennia later, the Americas. These migratory waves were not one-way or singular events. They consisted of countless smaller movements, expansions, and returns, shaped by climate changes, resource availability, and the presence of other hominin groups. Evidence now suggests that our ancestors occasionally interbred with Neanderthals in Eurasia and Denisovans further east. Traces of these relatives live on today in the genomes of many modern populations, providing a testament to these ancient encounters. From cave paintings to cultures. Over tens of thousands of years, humans developed symbolic art, cave paintings of horses, deer, hand stencils, and mysterious shapes. They created advanced toolkits, domesticated wild grasses and animals, and gradually shifted from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled farming communities. Population growth and cultural complexity accelerated. Civilizations rose and fell, languages diverged and evolved, and the mosaic of genetic lineages continued weaving together across continents. In all this grand tapestry, there is a single unbroken line leading to Shaun. We don't know the names of his Paleolithic ancestors. We don't know the exact routes they took or the languages they spoke, but we know they must have survived incredible hardships, ice ages, megafauna hunts, tribal conflicts, carrying forward the seeds of life through each new generation. None of Shaun's ancestors in any era could have afforded to be a complete evolutionary dead end. Each one must have successfully passed on their genes, or else Shaun wouldn't be here today. This unbroken lineage is both a scientific fact and a near miracle. Every single time an ancestor had a child, that child had to survive long enough to have their own child in an unbroken chain. Imagine the leaps and bounds of luck, perseverance, adaptation, and cooperation needed across millions of years. The ancient genealogical lines that led to Shaun wind through these first hominins, the branching of the Homo genus, the population expansions of Homo sapiens, and the eventual scattering across the globe. Chapter 4. From mammalian ancestors to primates. Shaun's family tree doesn't stop at the first hominins. It keeps going back, beyond the branching point between humans and chimpanzees. If we go further, tens of millions of years into the past, we find ancestors that were not quite apes yet, but early primates. Even earlier, we find small mammalian creatures scurrying underfoot of the dinosaurs. The rise of primates. Primates are distinguished by features like grasping hands with opposable thumbs or big toes, forward-facing eyes giving stereoscopic vision, and generally large brains relative to body size. The earliest primates likely resembled modern tree shrews or lemur-like animals. They were arboreal, finding safety in the canopy against the fierce reptilian or mammalian predators on the ground. As the Earth's climate shifted, so did the habitats of these early primates. Some groups ventured onto larger branches, some stayed in thick canopies, and others eventually adapted to ground living. The lineage that led to apes and monkeys branched off from those that would lead to lemurs and lorises. Then within the ape lineage, the lesser apes, gibbons, diverged, followed by the line that led to orangutans, then the line leading to gorillas, and eventually the line that leads to chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans. In time, some of these primates gained more robust bodies, learned to walk bipedally, at least part of the time, and developed social structures for cooperative living. The diets, predatory threats, and ecological changes selected for greater intelligence, better communication, and eventually the capacity to manipulate objects and plan for the future. Step by step, these ancient adaptations formed the basis for the advanced cognition that characterizes humans, mammals rising from the shadow of dinosaurs. Yet the evolution of primates was only possible after the age of dinosaurs ended around 66 million years ago, when a massive asteroid struck Earth, leading to a mass extinction that wiped out non-avian dinosaurs. The surviving mammals suddenly found ecological niches open to exploitation. Mammals, which had been relatively small and overshadowed by dinosaurs for tens of millions of years, began to radiate into new habitats. Some grew larger to occupy niches once held by larger reptiles. Others remained small and specialized. Some returned to the seas, like whales, while others took to the skies, like bats. Among those that stayed in the trees, the primates thrived. The lineage that would eventually lead to Shaun was among those mammalian survivors. Whatever small, rodent-like creature scurried through the underbrush in the Paleocene epoch, it carried the seeds of the future primate line. And from those seeds, eventually, a species of primate would learn to walk upright, craft tools, harness fire, and wander across the planet. Biology in action, genes and development. What made these mammalian ancestors different from reptiles is still coded in the genome we see in mammals today. Warm-blooded metabolism, hair or fur, mammary glands to nurse the young, and specific skeletal structures such as the middle ear bones. These features offered certain advantages in an ever-changing environment. Warm-bloodedness allows for better regulation of internal temperature, enabling mammals to be active even in cooler conditions. Nursing allows mothers to provide consistent nourishment to their offspring, improving survival rates. Over millions of years, these traits combined with countless other micro-adaptations to usher in the age of mammals. Shaun's warm little body, regulated at about 37 degrees Celsius, is a direct testament to this evolutionary heritage. His mother's ability to produce milk, allowing him to nurse and gain immunity factors through breast milk, harks back to ancient mammalian ancestors. Even though he is distinct in countless ways from those small squirrel-like creatures of 60 million years ago, the underlying biology remains an unbroken chain of living processes. Chapter 5. Reptilian and Amphibian Forebears. Before mammals, life on land was dominated by reptiles. Dinosaurs, yes, but also the lineages that preceded them. If we keep tracing Shaun's lineage further back, we arrive at ancestors who were neither mammal nor primate, but reptile-like creatures that eventually gave rise to mammals. Synapsids, the mammal-like reptiles. In evolutionary terms, the line that led to mammals is often called the synapsid lineage. Synapsids diverge from the lineage that would lead to modern reptiles and birds roughly 300 million years ago. These proto-mammals or mammal-like reptiles exhibit transitional features. They had aspects of reptilian physiology, but were also developing distinct mammalian traits, such as differentiated teeth, incisors, canines, molars, which are rare or absent in reptiles. One well-known group of synapsids, the therapsids, included species that began to show early hair or whiskers. By examining fossil skull openings, temporal fenestra, paleontologists can chart the slow transformation toward the mammalian ear and jawbones. Some of these creatures were predators, others herbivores. They weathered multiple extinction events, including the greatest mass extinction in Earth's history, the Permian-Triassic extinction, 252 million years ago. Those that survived continued on a precarious path. Over millions of years, they became more mammalian. Eventually, they gave rise to small, fur-bearing creatures scuttling in the shadow of larger reptiles during the Triassic and Jurassic periods, setting the stage for their grand radiations in the Cenozoic era, after the dinosaurs were gone, the amphibian bridge to land. But if we go further back than the synapsids, we arrive at amphibians. True reptiles with their amniotic eggs that can be laid on land did not simply appear out of nowhere. They evolved from amphibious creatures that were the first vertebrates to conquer land in the Devonian period, 400 million years ago. Those early amphibians themselves emerged from lobe-finned fish, Sarcopterygiae, that ventured into shallow waters and mudflats, their stout fins gradually evolving into strong limbs. By the Carboniferous period, vast swamps teemed with giant amphibians. Some lineages adapted better to land, laying eggs in more terrestrial environments or developing protective membranes around their eggs, the amnion, thus freeing themselves from the need to reproduce in water. This amniotic egg was a major evolutionary breakthrough, giving rise to reptiles, and in turn, paving the path for birds and mammals. It's humbling to think that an event like the evolution of the amniotic egg, some 300+ million years ago, was a necessary precursor for Shaun's existence. Without it, land-based vertebrate reproduction as we know it wouldn't exist. The shape of Shaun's family tree, indeed the entire mammalian line, depended on these transformations. Chapter 6. Life in the Seas, Fishy Beginnings. Going deeper still, we cross into a realm when our ancestors had not yet set foot on land. They were fish, swimming in ancient seas that were populated with marine invertebrates, algae, and the earliest corals. This portion of Shaun's lineage predates even the earliest amphibians. Cartilaginous versus bony fish. The earliest jawless fishes like lampreys and hagfish represent a very ancient branch of the vertebrate family tree. Sometime around 450 million years ago, fish with jaws appeared, giving them a significant advantage in feeding and defense. Over time, these fish branched into lineages: the cartilaginous fish, sharks, rays, and the bony fish, which further divide into ray-finned fish and lobe-finned fish. The latter group includes the lineage leading to terrestrial vertebrates, the lobe-finned pioneers. Within the bony fishes, lobe-finned fish such as Eusthenopteron and Tiktaalik had fleshy fins with bone structures reminiscent of the limbs that would eventually walk on land. Fossils of such transitional forms reveal wrist-like joints and primitive lungs that allowed them to breathe air in shallow waters. These evolutionary innovations bridged the aquatic environment to land, one of the greatest transitions in Earth's history. Genetic legacies from the sea. Even in humans today, echoes of our fish ancestry remain. For instance, in embryonic development, human embryos briefly display structures akin to pharyngeal gill slits. These are not actual gills, but they show that our developmental blueprint harkens back to when ancestors used gills for underwater respiration. Over millions of years, these structures have been repurposed or lost, yet the ghostly evidence remains in our genes and early embryonic forms. At this stage, we see how every crucial adaptation, jaws, limbs, lungs, was part of an ancient series of evolutionary experiments. If any link in that chain had been irreversibly broken, the story leading to Shaun might never have materialized in the same way. Each step built upon the successes and failures of the last, in an intricate dance shaped by environmental pressures and genetic possibilities. Chapter 7. The Great Explosion of Complexity, the Cambrian and Beyond. Well before our ancestors were fish, they were simpler creatures living in the seas. If we delve to around 540 million years ago, we encounter the Cambrian explosion, a relatively short evolutionary period in which an incredible variety of complex multicellular life forms appeared in the fossil record. This diversity included early arthropods, mollusks, worms, and the earliest chordates, the group that includes all vertebrates. Chordates and the notochord. Chordates are defined by the presence of a notochord, a rod-like structure that provides support, a dorsal nerve cord, pharyngeal slits, and a post-anal tail at some stage in their life cycle. Early chordates likely resembled modern lancelets, genus Branchiostoma, or tunicates, sea squirts, in some respects. Simple, filter-feeding organisms that possess the chordate blueprint. From these humble forms emerged the line that would lead to vertebrates, fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, primates, and finally humans. Multicellularity and its marvels. But chordates were not the only stars of the Cambrian. Many body plans emerged, some leading to extant lineages, others going extinct. This period showcased the evolutionary power of multicellularity, which had begun tens of millions of years earlier, but now exploded into myriad forms. With multicellularity came cell specialization, some cells forming protective outer layers, others focusing on digestion, reproduction, or locomotion. For Shaun's distant ancestors in this era, the world was strange and new. Predation became a driving force, as animals developed exoskeletons, shells, and other means of defense. Eyes evolved to detect prey and predators, thus fueling an arms race in the seas. This spurred further complexity as advanced sensory and nervous systems offered survival advantages. A deep family reunion. Imagine an undersea community teeming with creatures so alien that modern eyes might not recognize their shapes. Yet if you trace all the lineages that survive today, arthropods like insects and crustaceans, mollusks like snails and squids, echinoderms like starfish, chordates like fish and humans, you will find common ancestors somewhere in that Cambrian mix. The concestor that links humans to, say, lobsters is unimaginably ancient, but it is real. Evolution teaches us that every living being shares ancestry at some level, no matter how distant. And so in this undersea world, we find another critical chapter in Shaun's story, the time when the earliest chordates diverged from other animals, carrying forward the blueprint for vertebrate life. This blueprint, a flexible rod for support, a nerve cord, segmented muscles, would eventually lead, hundreds of millions of years later, to hearts, lungs, limbs, and brains capable of deep thought. Chapter 8. The First Multicellular Life and the Eukaryotic Merger. Traveling back before the Cambrian, we reach simpler multicellular organisms in the Ediacaran period, approximately 635 to 541 million years ago, as well as a long stretch when most life was single-celled. The transition from single-celled to multicellular life didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual process involving cells that stuck together after division, specialized in function, and benefited from cooperation. The eukaryotic revolution. A crucial point in this journey involves the evolution of the eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotes are cells with a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles such as mitochondria and chloroplasts in plants. They emerged over 1.5 billion years ago, most likely through a symbiotic merger between different types of single-celled organisms. The leading hypothesis, the endosymbiotic theory, suggests that mitochondria originated as free-living bacteria that were engulfed by a larger host cell. Instead of being digested, these bacteria offered the host a powerful energy production system, while the host provided a safe environment. Every cell in Shaun's body is a eukaryotic cell, complete with mitochondria that generate energy. If this symbiotic event had not occurred in the deep past, complex life as we know it, plants, animals, fungi, might never have arisen. The capacity for efficient energy production in eukaryotic cells paved the way for bigger, more complex organisms. It allowed for the possibility of multicellularity, specialized tissues, and eventually complex organs and nervous systems. Multicellularity's many origins. Interestingly, multicellularity arose multiple times in life's history, in animals, plants, fungi, and even some algae. Each lineage had its own route to bring cells together. For animals, Shaun's broader kingdom, multicellularity likely involved the evolution of cell adhesion molecules and signaling mechanisms that allowed groups of cells to coordinate their efforts. Over millions of years, these groups became more integrated, eventually forming creatures with distinct tissues and organ systems. Shaun's existence, therefore, is built upon this foundation of eukaryotic complexity and multicellular coordination. His cells talk to each other through chemical signals, nerve impulses, and hormonal messages. All of it ties back to ancient evolutionary innovations in single-celled organisms, learning to live together as one body. Chapter 9. The Prokaryotic World and the Origin of Life. If we proceed deeper still, we arrive at a world dominated by prokaryotes, simple, single-celled organisms without a nucleus or other membrane-bound organelles. This domain includes two major groups, bacteria and archaea. For billions of years, the most advanced life on Earth was microscopic. Even so, these microbes dramatically shaped the planet. Cyanobacteria and the oxygen revolution. Over 2.3 billion years ago, photosynthetic bacteria known as cyanobacteria started producing oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. This led to the Great Oxygenation Event, transforming Earth's atmosphere from one with little free oxygen to one with significant levels of O2. This shift was catastrophic for many anaerobic organisms, but it opened the door for aerobic respiration, the highly efficient energy pathway that fuels Shaun's body. Without that oxygen-rich atmosphere, complex life would have struggled to take hold, and the evolutionary path to multicellular animals might have stalled indefinitely. Archaea and the extreme environments. Alongside bacteria, archaea thrived, often in extreme environments like hot springs, salt lakes, or deep-sea hydrothermal vents. Although archaea look superficially like bacteria, they have distinct genetic and biochemical characteristics. Some scientists propose that the host cell in the endosymbiotic event that created eukaryotes might have been an archaean, meaning that inside every eukaryotic cell is a bit of archaean heritage, the common ancestral cell. If we go far enough back, over 3.5 to 4 billion years, the line between bacteria and archaea blurs, and we reach the last universal common ancestor, Luca. Luca was not a single individual, but rather a population of early replicators that shared a core set of genes and biochemical processes. From that population emerged two great domains, bacteria and archaea. Much later, a merging event or a series of merging events gave rise to the eukaryotes, and from eukaryotes eventually all plants, animals, fungi, and protists. Shaun's cells, like all animal cells, reflect a deep mosaic of these ancient lineages and mergers. Even at this stage, over 3.5 billion years ago, life was already remarkably sophisticated. Early cells possessed genetic material, ribosomes to build proteins, cell membranes that regulated their interactions with the environment, and metabolic pathways to harness energy. That set of biochemical machinery still underpins life today. Chapter 10: The Formation of Earth, a Habitat for Life. We've now gone beyond the realm of named species. To go any further, we must leave biology behind for a moment and focus on geology and planetary science. For Shaun to exist, there had to be a planet capable of supporting life. That planet is Earth, which formed about 4.54 billion years ago in the aftermath of the birth of the Sun and the coalescence of the solar system. The early Earth, Hadean Eon. In the first half-billion years known as the Hadean Eon, Earth was a violent place. Collisions with asteroids and planetesimals were frequent, melting the surface repeatedly. Volcanoes spewed gases, helping to form a primitive atmosphere. Water arrived via cometry and meteoritic impacts, and by outgassing from the planet's interior, eventually forming oceans. Conditions for life's emergence. Somewhere in the watery environment of early Earth, life emerged. We don't yet know exactly how. Hypotheses include deep-sea hydrothermal vents, tide pools repeatedly dried and re-wetted by cycles of sun and rain, or even the possibility of life's building blocks arriving on meteorites. Whatever the precise mechanism, it required certain conditions: liquid water, a source of energy, and the presence of organic molecules and elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur. The planet's continued stability over geologic time was also crucial. Earth's magnetic field protected it from harmful solar radiation, while plate tectonics recycled carbon and stabilized the climate. A delicate balance. Throughout Earth's history, various feedback loops regulated its climate and atmosphere. When volcanoes pumped CO2 into the air, temperatures could rise, but then chemical weathering and ocean absorption would pull that CO2 back down, preventing a runaway greenhouse effect, most of the time. Ice ages waxed and waned, deserts and jungles came and went, but despite massive fluctuations, life endured and diversified. Each extinction event opened ecological niches for new life forms. Each stable period allowed for the continued evolution of complexity. Without Earth's unique blend of circumstances, its position in the habitable zone around the Sun, its protective magnetic field, its liquid water, its geological recycling, and so much more, life as we know it might not have taken hold or persisted long enough to give rise to complex beings. It's this cosmic lottery that set the stage for biology, and eventually for every generation leading to Shaun. Chapter 11: The Birth of the Sun and the Solar System. If we rewind the clock further, we leave Earth behind and consider the Sun's origin within the larger galaxy. Roughly 4.6 billion years ago, our solar system began to form from a giant molecular cloud, a rotating disk of gas and dust left over from earlier generations of stars. The proto-Sun and accretion. In the nebula that birthed our Sun, gravity pulled most of the mass toward the center, igniting nuclear fusion in what would become a stable star. Surrounding this infant Sun was a swirling disk of leftover material. Dust particles clumped together, forming planetesimals. Through countless collisions, these planetesimals merged into protoplanets. Over millions of years, these protoplanets became the 8 planets of our solar system, including Earth, heavier elements from supernovae. The elements that compose Shaun's body, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, sulfur, trace metals like iron in his blood, calcium in his bones, were forged in older stars. The hydrogen in his body, part of every water molecule, dates all the way back to the Big Bang. But heavier elements like carbon and oxygen were created in the cores of massive stars and scattered through space when those stars died in supernova explosions. Thus, we are all, as Carl Sagan famously said, made of star stuff. This cosmic enrichment process was essential for forming rocky planets like Earth. Without supernovae, there wouldn't have been enough heavy elements in the universe to build life's chemistry. Hence, Shaun's story includes events that happened long before Earth even existed, events involving the deaths of massive stars, the scattering of new elements, and the gravitational reassembly of these elements into a newborn star system. All so that, billions of years later, a planet would have the right ingredients for life. A golden opportunity. Our Sun is a G-type main-sequence star, stable over billions of years, giving Earth enough time for complex life to evolve. If the Sun were a massive star, it would burn out quickly in a few million years, never giving life a chance to advance much beyond simple microbes. If it were too small, Earth might lie outside the habitable zone or face tidal locking. Many random factors aligned in just the right way, granting a golden opportunity for life to flourish. From this vantage, we can see how the birth of the Sun, a singular event, would ultimately allow for one baby boy, named Shaun, to breathe Earth's air billions of years later. Chapter 12. The Galaxy and the Big Bang. Our solar system is just one of billions in the Milky Way galaxy, which itself is one of countless galaxies in the observable universe. To complete Shaun's lineage, we must trace it back to the beginning of time as we understand it, the Big Bang, the Milky Way's formation. The Milky Way formed around 13.6 billion years ago, not long after the first stars ignited. Over cosmic time, smaller proto-galaxies merged, building up the spiral galaxy we call home. Within its spiral arms, clouds of gas and dust form generation after generation of stars. Along the way, each supernova event seeded the galaxy with heavier elements. Some 4.6 billion years ago, one of these metal-rich clouds collapsed to form our Sun and planets. The Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. According to current cosmological models, the universe began about 13.8 billion years ago in an event known as the Big Bang. Initially, the universe was an extremely hot, dense state. It expanded rapidly, cooling as it did so. Within the first few minutes, the nuclei of hydrogen, helium, and trace amounts of lithium formed. For the next few 100,000 years, the universe was an opaque plasma until it cooled enough for electrons to bind to nuclei, making the universe transparent to light. A moment captured in the cosmic microwave background radiation we detect today. Over hundreds of millions of years, gravitational attraction pulled hydrogen and helium into vast clumps, birthing the first stars. These stars fused hydrogen and helium into heavier elements in their cores, and when they died in supernova, they spread those elements throughout space. Galaxies coalesced, star formation continued, heavier elements accumulated, setting the stage for second and third generation stars like our Sun. Cosmic inevitability or improbability. It can boggle the mind to contemplate how a small fluctuation in the density of the early universe could have changed the entire cosmic structure, or how tiny variations in physical constants might have made stable atoms impossible. Yet the universe we observe did develop in a way that allows for the existence of galaxies, stars, planets, life, and intelligence. Whether we see this as inevitable or a lucky accident, it's the only universe we know, and it has given rise to us. From the vantage of modern cosmology, every bit of matter in Shaun's body, and in yours, in every person's, stretches back to that primordial moment. The protons in the hydrogen atoms in Shaun's cells have existed since the earliest epoch of the universe. They've merely changed partners, cycling through stars, cosmic dust, and eventually the Earth, until they found their way into him. Chapter 13. Convergence on the Present, an Unbroken Chain. Now that we've traced the story of the cosmos, the Earth, life, and human evolution, we return to the present moment, the hospital room in which Shaun lies sleeping softly. On the timescale we've just explored, a single human lifetime is fleeting, an instant in cosmic terms. Yet within that lifetime is encoded the sum of all that came before, compounding probabilities. It's almost impossible to calculate the probability that a particular person, like Shaun, should exist. Think of the trillions of random events that had to occur exactly as they did for his genetic combination to manifest. Every cosmic event, every mass extinction that shaped Earth's biodiversity, every migration and cultural shift among hominins, every chance meeting of Shaun's ancestors, culminating in his very DNA. Each generation was crucial. Each ancestor's survival was mandatory. If one link had failed, the chain would be broken, and someone else, someone different, would occupy Shaun's place. The beauty of biological continuity. Even though we talk about links in a chain, the reality is more akin to an ever-branching tree with countless twigs leading to a single bud. We could equally trace that line forward through siblings, cousins, second cousins, and so on, each carrying a variation of shared genetic themes. The continuity of life is what Darwin first eloquently described, and what subsequent generations of scientists, including Richard Dawkins, have further clarified and celebrated. Life on Earth is a single branching tapestry of descent with modification. The fact that we can talk meaningfully about concestors, common ancestors shared by different species, demonstrates how inescapable this biological continuity is. Shaun shares a concestor with chimpanzees around 6 to 7 million years ago, with dogs around 60 to 70 million years ago, with fish around 400 plus million years ago, with plants around 1 billion or more years ago, and with all bacteria at the dawn of life some 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. And behind all of that stands the universe itself, a stage prepared by gravitational collapses, supernovae, and cosmic expansion. Human culture adding another layer. In addition to his biological heritage, Shaun inherits a cultural one. He'll learn the language of his parents, absorb the history of his country, and eventually, if curious, he may learn about the cosmic history that shaped him. Culture moves at a different tempo, passing knowledge, traditions, and beliefs from generation to generation. Over time, cultural evolution can change the shape of societies, just as biological evolution changes the shape of species. Shaun arrives at a moment in history, with smartphones, space telescopes, genome sequencing, and an internet that can instantaneously connect him to the rest of the world. The cultural scaffolding that produced modern technology is as much a lineage as his genetic ancestry. Chapter 14. A reflection on time and existence. We have now journeyed from the present moment of Shaun's birth all the way back through billions of years, to the dawn of space and time as we know it. This final chapter will gather the threads and reflect on the majesty of it all. A cosmic perspective on a newborn. Holding Shaun in your arms, you might see just a tiny, fragile human baby. From the cosmic perspective, though, he is the culmination of stardust, hammered into shape by billions of years of universal and biological processes. He is a living mosaic of cosmic carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, forged in ancient furnaces of now-dead stars. He is a direct descendant of single-celled organisms that once floated in primordial seas, of pioneering fish that crawled onto land, of small rodent-like creatures hiding from dinosaurs, of ape-like ancestors who knuckle-walked through forests, of early humans who discovered fire, and of grandparents who braved the challenges of modern life. All of this is contained within a newborn, no bigger than a loaf of bread. Scientific understanding as a human triumph. This story reflects humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. We have deciphered clues in fossil records, starlight, cosmic microwave background radiation, genetic sequences, and geological strata. We have assembled those clues into a grand narrative that, while always open to further refinement, stands as one of our most profound accomplishments. It tells us we are not separate from the universe, but integral to it, products of its continuous unfolding, the endless tapestry. While we reach the beginning of the universe as we understand it, the story of Shaun does not end here. Life continues to evolve. The cosmos continues to expand and change. Shaun himself will grow, learn, and perhaps have children of his own, carrying forward the genetic line. Each new child will be another node in the unbroken thread of life. And in that sense, the story is both a circle and a line, circular in its themes, linear in its progression, always building upon what came before. the gift of awe. To trace a lineage like Shaun's is to step out of our ordinary sense of time and realize just how connected we are to everything that exists. It can instill a sense of awe and responsibility. Recognizing that the entire universe's history led to this moment, we might feel a deep reverence for life, Earth, and all living beings. Every breath we take uses oxygen from an atmosphere shaped by billions of years of microbial and plant activity. Every atom of our body was once out there in the cosmos, drifting, waiting to be assembled into a star, a planet, and eventually, a person. A word on probability and mystery. Some may ask, was this destiny or mere chance? From the standpoint of science, it's both. The laws of physics and chemistry make certain outcomes more likely, and evolution by natural selection channels life along certain paths. But chance plays an enormous role at every level. Cosmic collisions, random mutations, historical contingencies, and personal decisions in each generation of humans. The final outcome, Shaun's existence, was not predetermined, yet it arises from an unbroken logical chain of cause and effect. We might find deep meaning in this interplay of order and chaos, stepping back to look forward. The story we've told is grander than any myth, yet it rests on scientific evidence and reason. It reminds us that each human life is extraordinarily precious, and also that we share a common origin with all other forms of life on Earth. In the fullness of time, even the sun will die, and the galaxy itself may merge with Andromeda, billions of years from now. The far future is as vast and unknown as the deep past. But for now, life thrives, and new babies are born every second, each one a miniature universe of possibilities. Conclusion: the child of the cosmos. Shaun's lineage, like every person's, is the entire history of existence as we know it. To look at his tiny face is to see the result of ancient stardust, molded by eons of cosmic artistry. He is at once utterly unique and deeply representative of the human condition, and by extension, of the life condition. His story is a microcosm of the cosmos itself, a testament to the power of change, complexity, and emergence. And so in this final reflection, let us hold on to the wonder. Whenever we see a newborn, whether it's Shaun or another baby, let us remember the impossible-seeming, yet very real history etched into their bones and blood. Let us imagine the unimaginable scale of events that spanned billions of years so that this one small being could arrive. And let us celebrate this improbable miracle, a child of the earth, a child of the stars, a child of time and space, and a child of humanity's unending quest to understand itself.